Does size really matter? It's a question that has divided people for generations. Throughout the ages, humankind have wanted to know just how big we are. We have a deep desire to know our place in the grand scheme of things. Have you ever thought about the sheer enormity of the universe we inhabit and wondered whether you even matter at all? Or perhaps you've stared at a tiny ant and thought to yourself, where is it going? How does it feel? Does it know more than it wants me to think? These are the questions that burn deep in the soul of civilization. The questions we ask ourselves when we stare up at the night sky and ponder on its vast incomprehensible nature. From the smallest known building blocks of matter to the gargantuan structures that dominate our universe, scale is a thing of awe and wonder. In this program, I'll be taking a closer look at the little things in life. I'll investigate objects beyond the reaches of the naked eye and the tools we use to record them. I'll reach deep into the muddy bog of history and hope to grasp ancient bones of science long gone by. It's a journey not only into the microscopic, but the mysterious world of the scientists who measure it. I'll peer into physics' darkest heart and ask the question, should we really be doing this? Join me on a voyage into the smallest nooks and crannies of planet Earth. Take my hand, and together we will peel back the sheath of science. Our story begins at a research facility in Zurich, Switzerland. During the mid-1980s, computing giant IBM were researching ways of measuring and manipulating matter at a scale far smaller than the human eye can see. At the time, the field of computer technology was a veritable goldmine. Cash was in no short supply, and the scientists of the new digital age became godlike figures, creating all that once pleased them in a heavenly silicon garden.
Well, during the computer science enlightenment age of the 1980s, big tech firms like IBM were actually employing physicists to carry out their research for them. And the money brought in by consumer electronics, it really meant there was funds around to do some really innovative experiments, and actually it would have been a fantastic time to be working in the field.
With the money flowing freely, IBM were able to channel funds into wholly unprecedented areas of research. One of their employees was Gerd Binning, a German physicist and Nobel Prize biggest boy of the year. Binning led the development of an instrument so accurate it could record images at an atomic level. For the first time, people were able to see pictures of the tiny building blocks that make up the world around us. Ever the family man, Binning named the invention after his son, atomic force microscope.
Well, the technique was revolutionary really, in that it allowed us to look thousands of times below the optical limit. That's a fundamental physical limit on how small you can see things using your conventional methods like your microscopes, telescopes, cameras, what have you. And that's basically because the thing you're trying to image is about the same size as the wavelength of light, so you can't go any smaller than that using light.
The device Binning created was a wonder of modern engineering. Atomic force microscopy, or AFM for short, utilises a combination of ultrafine mechanical control and computer imaging. The first component is a tiny metal cantilever, no more than 125 micrometers long. That's the size of a massive carp, shrunk down to the same diameter as an unfertilized human egg. The tip of the cantilever is mind-bogglingly small, measuring just 3 nanometers wide. That's as small as the biggest carp ever caught, only 508,000 times smaller. The tiny cantilever is connected to a piezo motor, which performs two different functions. Firstly, it drives the cantilever to oscillation, just below its resonant frequency. This causes the tip to jiggle up and down in a thrusting motion. Secondly, it moves the cantilever across a surface, adjusting the height to maintain a constant amplitude of oscillation. To measure the amplitude, a laser is bounced off the cantilever and into a split photodiode. This information is then fed into a metal brain or computer and used to create a topographical image of the material.
Well, unlike a lensed camera, which uses, reflects light off the surface and onto a detector, the atomic force microscope, it actually physically probes the sample, and that allows you to build up a profile. It kind of works like this.
This method, known within the field of AFM as dynamic tapping mode, was revolutionary in allowing scientists to depict matter at a scale far smaller than ever before. But the technology's uses didn't stop there. By setting the target amplitude to below the surface of the sample, binning was able not only to depict matter, but to penetrate its surface. Much like a carp ploughing its way nose first through a silty riverbed, AFM can be used to etch miniature drawings. They say that necessity is the mother of invention, but what exactly are tiny drawings necessary for? You couldn't hang one in a picture frame because it would look silly. If you then curated an exhibition of tiny drawings, you'd be the laughingstock of the art world. In 1989, IBM used another instrument, known as a scanning tunneling microscope, to write their logo in singular xenon atoms on a piece of crystalline nickel. Needless to say, it was too small to see, and they were laughed out of the locker room of science. It was time to call it a day and go home for a nice hot bath. With IBM focusing their attention on bigger, less embarrassing projects, AFM was put on the lonely top shelf in the attic of ideas, with the world's attention turned to new scientific feats, like the Large Hadron Collider and silicon balls for neutered dogs. No one wanted to look at boring old atoms anymore. Here at the BBC Department of Science and Nature Programming, we thought AFM was so 1989, but that was all about to change when our producer received an anonymous photo message via the popular messaging app Snapchat. What the message appeared to show was a minuscule todger etched 16 nanometers deep into a polycarbonate sample. Measuring just 2 microns long and girthing in at 0.7 microns, a dong of its size was wholly unprecedented. Even the giggleberries were properly pathetic, with a diameter of just 0.36 micrometers each. We had the photo analysed by a team of physicists and digital imaging experts to check its veracity. They told us the thing was modest, to say the least. To put all that into perspective, you could fit 1.4 million copies of that wing-wang on the head of a pin. Verifying the size of the mysterious meatus confirmed that the image was real, but it also unearthed a much bigger question. Where in the world had that pork sword come from? With Binning and his team at IBM now engrossed in newer, more exciting technologies, they had no reason to be sliding their nasty business all up in our DMs. Could it have been a rival company flaunting their gun cabinet? Perhaps CERN or Microsoft? Or could it have been a lone wolf, some amateur AFM enthusiast with a penchant for fun-sized love truncheons? For all our scientific posturing, we had no clues, no leads, and no idea. But then we got a phone call that changed everything. A tip-off from an anonymous university employee led us right to the perpetrator himself. What I'm still struggling to grasp is, though, why did you draw a tiny penis and then send it into the BBC? Infantilism aside, drawing the thing was no small feat. Ireland and his team had to overcome a number of technical difficulties. Dynamic tapping mode is designed primarily for moving cantilevers in straight lines. When it comes to drawing a pair of plums, the curvature of each fruit portion proves rather difficult to navigate. If that wasn't enough, their initial attempts were blighted by a faulty engage motor in an AFM setup. That's the part of the operation that lowers the AFM down onto the surface. No engage motor, no tiny poke party.
Well, we were fighting against all the odds. Weren't even sure if it was actually going to work. And to make matters worse, the university actually hadn't agreed to the project. They said it'd be a waste of funds. Do you think Elon Musk had to deal with this kind of shit? I doubt it.
Operating in secret and without permission from the University of Sheffield, Ireland and his team were up against the clock. Presented with unruly testicular geometry and an engaged motor that was still failing to comply, it seemed as if all hope was lost. But then, a miracle happened. The motor spluttered back to life and the tip made contact. Like a tiny commuter driving home after a bad day at the office, the cantilever wobbled its way over Bannock Hill, up Shaftesbury Avenue, parked in Mushroom Tip Crescent, forgot their fucking house keys, and had to go all the way back to work again. And there it was, etched into a 1 centimetre polycarbonate shard, was one of the smallest schmackles ever to be depicted. 1 nanometre step for an atomic force microscope, one massive great carp flopping around in the keep net of science. When I saw the nanopenis for the first time, I was appalled. It was just so minuscule. But strangely, my disgust gave way, and I found myself thinking about the great landmarks of modern science. The moon landing, the atomic bomb, boneless chickens. For better or for worse, humankind have strived to make the biggest mark we can on the world around us. From the earliest cave paintings to Mount Rushmore, we seem to have this deep desire to make our surroundings more familiar, to shape nature in our own image. But it seems as if all this time, we've missed the opportunities that are right in front of us. We've forgotten to leave our mark on the things that are so close you could touch them, yet somehow still out of reach. Sometimes we need a visionary to show us what we're missing. It takes a mole to climb a mountain, and a mole expert to tell us that the mole is actually a goat. Scientists like Binning in Ireland remind us that the blue sky of science isn't only above our heads, it's also under our feet, up our sleeves, and in our ears. With our aspirations standing firm, who's to say where the limits of the microscopic must end?